For the first time in African history, top executives of foreign mining conglomerates were simultaneously arrested, all in one sweeping operation. Leading this unprecedented move was none other than Burkina Faso's defiant leader, Ibrahim Traoré. The question that stunned the world: how did CEOs of some of the globe's most powerful mining firms find themselves in handcuffs in a nation they had exploited freely for decades? How did a 50-year-long system of unchecked resource extraction suddenly come crashing down? For more untold African stories, be sure to subscribe to our channel. It all kicked off at exactly 6 a.m. on March 15th in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. 7 mining CEOs, all lodged in upscale hotels, were apprehended at once as elite special forces conducted precise, coordinated raids. Among them was Victor Petro, the CEO of Goldmax Corporation, one of the world's leading gold producers. Also detained were Jean-Claude Dubois from Canadian Western Gold Mining and Michael Thompson of Australian Pacific Resources. But this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment action. Traoré had meticulously orchestrated it for months in silence. He began by poring over the financial records of every mining operator in the country. Then he assembled a legal task force made up of international law specialists to build airtight criminal cases. What they uncovered was staggering. Over 5 decades, $500 billion worth of gold had been extracted, yet Burkina Faso's treasury had received only $10 billion. Over 6 months, Traoré's team operated in stealth. They embedded informants at mining sites, launched drone surveillance, analyzed satellite imagery, and verified production data. The findings? Shocking. Companies had only been declaring a fraction, just 10%, of what they actually mined. Traoré put it bluntly: gold dug from our soil by the sweat of our people now fills European vaults, while my citizens starve. This exploitation ends now. His ultimatum was clear: repay what was stolen or face life behind bars. The arrests were swift and unyielding. Victor Petro tried to summon private security, but special forces had already locked down the hotel. He was seized in his sleepwear and transferred immediately to a high-security prison. Jean-Claude Dubois, meanwhile, was caught mid-escape. Dubois had a private jet fueled and ready to flee, but Traoré was 10 steps ahead. He shut down the airspace and sealed the country's borders. Dubois never made it out. He was intercepted en route and immediately arrested. Meanwhile, Michael Thompson from Australian Pacific Resources was cornered in a hotel conference room. He was actively attempting to transfer company assets abroad when agents burst in. His open laptop, mid-transfer, became damning evidence on the spot. Traoré left no room for error. He demanded all mining companies submit a full decade's worth of financial records. A team of forensic accountants and legal experts spent months combing through them. What they uncovered was staggering. Goldmax Corporation, for example, extracted $500 million worth of gold in 2019 from just one mine, Toparco. But they paid only $5 million in taxes. Why? Because 90% of the gold was never declared. They reported extracting 1 ton per day, but in reality, it was 10. The remaining 9 tons vanished, unrecorded and untraceable. Western Gold Mining had its own scheme, manipulating invoices. They'd sell gold worth $60,000 on paper for just $10,000. The remaining value? Funneled into offshore bank accounts, far from the reach of Burkina Faso's treasury. Pacific Resources employed a more bizarre strategy. They inflated miners' salaries on paper, claiming tax deductions for wages that workers never actually received. The surplus went straight into company pockets. Traoré wasn't deceived. He personally reviewed every line, every figure, every contract. He compiled everything meticulously as legal evidence. But what truly shook the investigation were the backroom deals between mining firms and corrupt government elites. In 2015, Marc Carber, then Burkina Faso's energy minister, accepted a $50 million bribe from Goldmax. In exchange, the company's tax rate dropped from 30% to a meager 3%, costing the country an estimated $2 billion annually. Western Gold Mining went even further. In 2017, they paid $100 million to Francois Carber, the brother of then-President Ro Carber. The payoff secured 3 gold licenses on ancestral lands. As a result, 50,000 villagers were uprooted, their homes and farms bulldozed for profit. And here's the question Traoré posed to the nation. If you were one of those 50,000, what would justice look like? He didn't wait for an answer. With all the damning evidence in hand, Traoré filed charges with the International Criminal Court. The era of impunity, he declared, was over. He proved beyond doubt that these companies weren't just guilty of tax fraud or illegal profits. They were complicit in crimes against humanity. From forced displacement and child labor to irreversible environmental damage, the evidence was undeniable. The International Criminal Court accepted the charges. Then came Traoré's boldest strike. He froze the bank accounts of all foreign mining operations in the country. Every asset was seized, and the entire national gold reserve, valued at $100 billion, was taken under state control. That gold, he declared, now belonged to the people of Burkina Faso. The world responded instantly. The headlines were explosive. Western outlets branded him a dictator. The European Union called an emergency session. The U.S. issued stern warnings. But Traoré stood unshaken. "We are enforcing the law," he stated. "For 50 years, these corporations have plundered our land and exploited our people with impunity. Now justice is catching up." The Burkinabe people rallied behind him. Massive crowds filled the streets of Ouagadougou, chanting in unison, "Our gold is ours." For once, villagers in mining zones could imagine a future. Amadou Sawato, a 65-year-old miner, broke into tears on camera. "I gave 40 years to these mines," he said. "Europe grew rich on our backs. My children still can't go to school. But today, there is justice." Meanwhile, the arrested CEOs, used to 5-star hotels and boardrooms, were now confined to sweltering cells. Viktor Petrov of Goldmax began a hunger strike. Traoré's reply? "Our miners starve every day. Perhaps now you'll understand." Western Gold Mining's Jean-Claude Dubois attempted to post $1 billion in bail through his legal team. Traoré laughed it off. "A billion? When you've stolen 500 times that? Besides, the money isn't yours. It's ours." Michael Thompson tried theatrics, collapsing in the hallway and claiming a heart attack. But Traoré wasn't buying it. His personal medical team found no health issue. The false claim became further evidence, obstruction of justice. And it didn't stop there. More CEOs were dragged in. Robert McKenzie of Continental Gold, James Harrison from African Minerals, Peter Williams from Global Mining Co-op, and David Anderson of Summit Resources. Each had a darker tale. McKenzie faced charges for clearing entire villages off their ancestral lands by force. Justice, long denied, had finally arrived. James Harrison was charged with exploiting child labor, children as young as 10, forced into grueling and dangerous conditions. Peter Williams was brought to trial for large-scale environmental devastation, and David Anderson was accused of financing armed militant groups with mining profits. Then the world turned its gaze toward the trials, a historic reckoning unfolding in Burkina Faso. Traoré had formed a new special tribunal specifically for these cases, and its makeup sent a bold message. 3 judges from Africa, 2 from Asia, and 2 from Latin America. No Western influence, no bias, just justice. At the opening hearing, the lead prosecutor stood before the packed courtroom and read out the charges one by one. Each mining executive had a thick legal file filled with decades of wrongdoing. Goldmax CEO Viktor Petrov faced 234 charges, including tax fraud, bribery, forced displacement, and mass environmental abuse. Jean-Claude Dubois of Western Gold Mining faced 189 counts. Among the most disturbing, verified use of child labor. Children, some as young as 12, were forced to work underground for up to 16 hours a day with no sunlight or fresh air. Many died before reaching age 15 from severe lung disease. But the most horrifying case came from Pacific Resources. Executive Michael Thompson had been using cyanide in mining processes without proper safeguards. The toxic runoff had poisoned 3 rivers, causing cancer rates to spike across 17 villages. Over 2,000 lives were lost, confirmed through medical records and death certificates. Victim testimonies in the courtroom left many in tears. These weren't just statistics, they were lives destroyed. Musa Orahugo, who started mining at just 8 years old and was now 23 and terminally ill, took the stand. They stole my childhood, he said, barely able to breathe. They stole my health, my future, everything. Then came Mariam Cow, a 70-year-old woman whose village had been wiped off the map. Standing with trembling hands, she recounted how their ancestral burial grounds were bulldozed to clear space for a mine. Our history was buried there, she whispered. They didn't just evict us, they erased us for gold. And what did we receive? Mariam asked, her voice breaking. $100. The courtroom fell silent. $100 in exchange for generations of land and heritage, while billions in gold were shipped overseas. Throughout the trial, Traoré remained composed but unwavering. He didn't stay behind closed doors or hide in high offices. Every day, he was in court, sitting among citizens, listening closely, staring down the accused. Speaking to reporters outside the courthouse, he declared, "This isn't just Burkina Faso's fight, it's Africa's. If we win here, others will follow." And they did. His firm stand sent shockwaves across the continent. In Mali, leader Ennemi Goa opened formal probes into foreign miners. Guinea's Madi Doya followed suit. In Niger, President Abdourahmane Chiani tore up several long-standing mining contracts. The dominoes began to fall. The corporate world went into a tailspin. Goldmax Corporation's stock plummeted by over 70%. Western gold mining hovered near bankruptcy. Pacific Resources shuttered all its African operations. Boardrooms across Europe and North America panicked, convening emergency meetings to stop the fallout. Then came the retaliation. French President Emmanuel Macron issued a public threat. "You'll pay for this. Our investors are not to be touched." But Traoré shot back without blinking. "Call them what they are. Colonizers, not investors. We welcome genuine partners, not criminals in business suits." The United States followed suit. President Joe Biden warned of sanctions, cutting off financial aid to Burkina Faso. But Traoré responded with a laugh. "Which aid? The $100 million you offer yearly? We'll make $10 billion from our gold alone. Keep your aid. Use it on your puppet regimes." Meanwhile, the court kept receiving damning evidence. Leaked emails from company servers showed executives mocking the very people they exploited. "Stupid natives," one Goldmax message read. "We can make them dance with a few million in bribes." The mask was off. The world was watching. Western Gold Mining's leaked communications were even more horrifying. Executives casually referred to child laborers as cheap labor. One line from CEO Dubois was particularly monstrous. "Instead of paying $100 to one adult, we give $10 to 10 children, and they never make a sound." At Pacific Resources, internal memos revealed detailed instructions on how to dump cyanide waste straight into rivers. "No one will notice," one document stated coldly. "Besides, these people don't live long anyway. Even if they die from cancer, they won't know who to blame." The rot was everywhere. Robert Mackenzie of Continental Gold called the forced eviction of villagers a necessary sacrifice for progress. James Harrison at African Minerals justified mine deaths as an acceptable loss. And Peter Williams at Global Mining Co-op dismissed environmental devastation with the chilling remark, "Nature will renew itself eventually." Traoré, reviewing these documents, trembled, not with rage but with resolve. Calmly, he closed the files and addressed the court. "Now you see how they view us. We're nothing to them. But that game, it's over. Justice is coming." After 6 long months, the courtroom held its breath as the verdicts were delivered. Guilty. Every last one. Victor Petrov of Goldmax, 50 years in prison and a $10 billion fine. Jean-Claude Dubois of Western Gold, 45 years and $8 billion. Michael Thompson of Pacific Resources, life imprisonment for environmental crimes that led to mass deaths. Robert Mackenzie of Continental Gold, 40 years for forced displacement. James Harrison of African Minerals, 55 years for exploiting children in deadly mine labor. Peter Williams of Global Mining Co-op, 60 years for mass environmental destruction. David Anderson of Summit Resources, life without parole for financing armed militias. But it didn't end there. In a landmark decision, the court ordered that all personal assets of the convicted CEOs, from yachts to private jets, from luxury homes to rare art, be seized by the state. And then came the moment that shocked the world. The court ruled that proceeds from these sales would go directly to the victims' families. From the courthouse steps, Ibrahim Traoré addressed the nation and the world. Today, we didn't just sentence 7 men. We put an entire colonial system, 500 years of theft, exploitation, and bloodshed, on trial. And we won. And with those words, and today we won, a new chapter for Africa was born. Ibrahim Traoré declared that from this point forward, the wealth of the land would finally serve its true owners, the people. He wasted no time. The remaining assets of the corrupt mining corporations were seized and nationalized. In their place, the Burkina Faso National Mining Company was born, a fully state-owned enterprise designed to manage and control the country's vast resources. Its mandate was bold and unapologetic. 70% of all mining revenue would go directly to building schools, hospitals, roads, and better lives. And the results were instant. In regions once scarred by exploitation, modern hospitals and new schools rose from the dust. Miners' wages skyrocketed, from a meager $50 to $500 per month. Child labor was completely abolished. Real safety protocols were introduced across all operations, matching international standards. The mines that were once death traps became places of hope and dignity. In the streets, joy erupted. Children chanted his name. Elderly men raised their fists. Mothers wept tears of joy. Traoré brought back our gold, they sang. He is the people's man. What followed were scenes of celebration across the nation, not just for justice served, but for the rebirth of a people long oppressed. Meanwhile, Western media launched attacks. They painted him as a strongman, a populist, a threat. But the people, they knew the truth. On the ground, reality drowned out the headlines. Burkina Faso's economy soared, unemployment plunged, poverty rates shrank rapidly. And in schools, clinics, and villages, the quiet signs of transformation were undeniable. National income surged 300% in just 1 year. 500 new schools and 200 hospitals were built from scratch. 5,000 kilometers of roads were paved. Electricity reached 2,000 villages for the first time in history. Over 3 million people gained access to clean drinking water, ending generations of suffering. Mine workers who once toiled in silence now thrived. Every one of them received national health insurance. Safety in the workplace became law, enforced with zero compromise, and the number of mining-related deaths fell to 0. But perhaps the greatest achievement was in education. Technical universities were built in every mining region. For the first time ever, the youth of Burkina Faso didn't have to flee to find opportunity. They could stay and study engineering, geology, chemistry, right in their own communities. 10,000 students enrolled, all on full scholarships funded by the very wealth that once left their land in silence. Burkina Faso was no longer a victim. It had become a model, a beacon, for what African self-determination could look like. And the ripple didn't stop at Burkina Faso's border, it surged across the continent like a tidal wave. In Mali, 5 mining executives were arrested. In Guinea, foreign bauxite companies were nationalized. In Niger, control over uranium mines was taken back by the state. A new African awakening was underway, and the world was watching. At a public gathering in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood before thousands and said simply, "We are not enemies to anyone. Our door is open to every nation seeking fair, honest trade." He paused, letting the silence speak, then added with conviction, "But the era of exploitation is over. Africa's resources belong to African people." And just like that, the message was clear. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about justice. Meanwhile, those once mighty CEOs, who ruled from skyscrapers and private jets, faded into obscurity behind prison walls. Their companies crumbled. Goldmax Corporation collapsed entirely. Western Gold Mining was sold off to a no-name bidder. Pacific Resources was broken up to repay its debts. Their legacy? Reduce of footnotes in a revolution they never saw coming. What Traoré had done was more than an act of national policy. It became history. For the first time ever, an African leader had stood defiant, unwavering, and victorious in the face of decades of Western exploitation. And for the first time, the people of Burkina Faso weren't just survivors of history, they were its authors. Now their gold didn't vanish into offshore accounts. It built hospitals, schools, roads, hope. Children who once choked on dust in mine shafts now played football, read books, and dreamed without fear. Miners once paid in scraps could now build homes, raise families, and walk with dignity. And Traoré's resistance crossed oceans. From Latin America to Asia, from slums to parliaments, the echo of his movement inspired others to rise. Flags were raised, walls of silence cracked. People long ignored finally found their voice. Traoré had said, "Justice always finds its place, sometimes late, sometimes loud, but it comes." And it had. The old system, built on stolen riches and hidden violence, was crumbling. Africa had stood up. And this time, it would not fall back asleep. Because the people were awake. Because leaders like Ibrahim Traoré had shown them how to fight. Because now, everything had changed. But this story isn't over. Traoré's struggle continues, and so does the revolution. Each morning, he rises and takes another stride toward a truly liberated Africa, a step toward dignity, toward sovereignty. And one day soon, the entire continent will be free. Its wealth will no longer be signed away in secret deals. It will belong to its children, by right. That day draws closer because Traoré has paved the way, and now the people are walking it. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Your voice matters. If you stand for justice, dignity, and the rise of a new Africa, like this video, share it with others and hit subscribe. Stay with us. The journey is far from over, and the truth is just beginning to rise.